Hello, and welcome back to the Battle Frontier podcast, where we aim to help you level up in your journey as a competitive Pokemon TCG player. I'm Aaron Curry, here with me as always, my co-host John Orgel, and this week we're going to be diving into the results of the Monterrey Regional Championship down in Mexico this past weekend, before we hit up John with a time capsule for a deck that may be a little bit reminiscent of one of the decks that finished highly in that event. And then we will talk about how we have seen the meta evolve and how we expect it to potentially further evolve headed into the special events this weekend and then further on into Milwaukee the following weekend. And before we get into everything, as is tradition, John, I want to know, what were you doing this past week?
This past week, what did I do? Not a whole lot of Pokemon. Let's see, Saturday, I had two friends coming to town, so we went to art museum. Oh, it was Sunday, but we went, I think we just played some board games and like hung out. Not too much, just had a lazy kind of day.
Sure.
And then Sunday we celebrated what we've now dubbed as Meatster. We do an annual tradition of going to Brazilian steakhouse. And if you've ever been to Brazilian steakhouse, it's like basically all you can eat steak. And so we've done that, just me and Sydney. But this year we included a couple of our other friends. So we just do that for the whole day. And that is quite the fun experience. I would recommend it. I don't know. That was about it. Yesterday we had our league challenge. So we had kind of a trying to think. Yeah, it was kind of cool. One of our longtime friends of the cast, Ian Gardner, got first place with his Hopsization deck, so that was cool to see. But it was pretty mid turnout. Like, we had about 10 players for our league challenge, so it was fun. But yeah, it was pretty chill week. I don't think every weekend has to be full of Pokemon to have a lot of fun.
Sure.
But how about you? I know you might have had some stuff going on over your weekend.
Yeah, unfortunately, my son got sick last Wednesday night
Mm.
and spent the majority of Wednesday night in the ER at the hospital, and then he was actually transferred to the Children's Hospital in Orlando up until Saturday afternoon.
Wow.
So Julia and I took shifts being over there for the day, and then whoever wasn't there was obviously at home, like taking care of our dogs and everything. And we just kept going back and forth. And I spent a lot of the time that I was there, since he was pretty out of commission, I either spent playing TCG Live or TCG Pocket when I wasn't doing work stuff. So I did a little bit of grinding on Pocket, and I'm almost to Master Ball now.
Wow.
Which is probably way more games than I should be putting into Pocket.
Yeah, that is. I finally played the ranked ladder in Pocket.
Okay.
This week I got the second Giratina EX that I needed for my deck. So I had Giratina Darkrai queued up, and I played, like, I think I won 7 games straight with it, and then I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I don't think I can really do much before the ladder resets in like a week. So I was just like, but I can see where like it gets addictive. Like if you get that win streak going,
Yeah.
you're like doing pretty well.
Up until you hit Ultra Ball, when that win streak thing goes away. Like it is pretty nice. You feel like you're zooming through, and then you hit Ultra 1 is still kind of all right. Ultra 2 for a while feels like a brick wall. But the nice thing, they've designed it so that it's supposed to be like a progressive thing. You're not meant to grind all the way to Master Ball in one season. Like, the rewards are there for the people that are diehard and want to do it, but because you don't reset all the way back to 0 every season, I think you go down like 3 tiers total.
Okay.
After a season. Maybe it's 4. I don't remember, honestly. But you get this kind of sense of progression over time. So it would be a little bit better than something like what we have on TCG Live, but because there are actually rewards associated with it, whereas TCG Live is just you're playing into Arceus to have the privilege of playing with ostensibly better players.
Yeah.
And that does eventually come. You have to get a decent way into Arceus to actually hit that effect, but it is available to people if they are willing to grind their way through the madness to get there.
Did you get to Arceus in Live?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I hit Arceus every season. Like, that's never a problem.
That's so funny. I've never hit Arceus on Live, and
you are not committed to the digital Pokemon lifestyle.
I'm not that guy. Like, I love Pokemon, I love playing, but I can't play Live for like more than 3 games in a row. I just like get to the point where I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. Like, it just like playing Pokemon on the computer like just drains me, and it might just be because like I don't feel like I'm literally like doing like puzzles like outside of the game because there's so much downtime in Pokemon. I feel
Sure.
like compared to other games. But
Yeah, and I
anyway,
mean, when you're playing paper, like you can talk to your opponent about
yeah,
whatever else, or talk to the guy doing the game next to you about whatever else, and there's a little bit more engagement that way. I don't know. It's something where I guess I'm able to just focus on it properly enough. It hits me the right way where I don't necessarily get fully bored with it, and a lot of it I think comes down to deck choice too.
true.
Like if you find something that you really want to grind out, or if you find something that just plays really fast games, then you can kind of get away with it. It makes it a little bit easier to get through everything.
Yeah, that's
But
fair.
yeah, so did that through Saturday, and then unfortunately I ended up catching whatever my son had, and I was out of commission Sunday night all through yesterday. Um, I told John before the cast I actually slept from like 10:15 p.m. Sunday night through like 4:15 p.m. yesterday. So Monday, probably the most sleep I've gotten in one stretch
That's insane.
in the past
Yeah.
decade. And the last time that I slept that much, I was probably equally as ill. So that was not the most fun thing. Thankfully, obviously, I'm on the other side of that and am slowly progressing towards being back to 100%. But yeah, I did get to on Sunday also tune in prior to my downfall, tune in to a little bit of the kind of bootleg stream
Yeah.
for Monterey that Christian Fontenot set up using
Yeah,
his
I saw that
phone.
too. Sticks TCG shout out.
Yeah, setting up his phone to display the projector screen that they had in the event. The quality was absolutely terrible.
It was
But
so
I don't
bad.
know what I expect when you have somebody streaming on either phone or maybe cell signal from a venue in a different country off of who knows how good of a quality the projector was. And it's one
Yeah,
of those things where it's like at least there's something available, I guess.
at one point he had like 800 people watching. It's crazy.
Wow, that is pretty
Yeah.
crazy.
I mean, the finals was it was a good finals, I think. I mean, the games was like I think a 2-0 set, but
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
get into that.
Well, yeah, but I think that that's a good enough a segue as any, though, that we can go ahead and just look at Monterey as a whole.
Sure.
And to start with, we'll just look at the metagame for everything. So, day one metagame percentages, even despite the stream, thanks to Robin once again over here at labs.limitlesstcg.com for all of your tournament needs, because Robin is able to scrape that Arcanine data. We can still look at our day one and day two meta percentages. And once again, we see Dragapult Dusknoir as the number one deck heading into. Oh, sorry. Let me combine our variants here. So Dragapult, over a quarter of the room day one.
Wow.
Raging Bolt and
That's crazy.
Goldengo kind of flip flopping places from last week in Atlanta to still be the number 2 and 3 decks, respectively, here. But Gardevoir making a big rise up to being number 4 after following the win in Atlanta. Terrabox, interestingly, maintaining place in that top 6 along with Archaludon. And then we see a fall off for the other kind of smattering of decks further down the line. And then we look forward to day 2. And Dragon Ball had a little bit of a dip with Goldengo and Raging Bolt actually making some gains on it
Wow,
going
Raging
into
Bolt
day 2.
converting.
I know we called last week not good. This week did better. Still didn't win very much in day 2, but a lot of people don't. But really, the top 6 decks maintain their position as the top 6 decks, and the other kind of notable things are the decks that converted pretty well here, and that would be the Joltik box, which is something we're going to highlight here in a little bit. It was kind of a new deck that popped up in Japan initially in city leagues, and people decided they wanted to bring it out for a test run in Monterey, apparently. And we also see some kind of decent conversions coming from Blissey, of all things. Small sample size, only 2 players, but the other big one being the Eevee box or Flareon box, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, then we get into our overall results here. The winner of the event, finally, after all of the number 2s that he's gotten this season alone, Brent Tonneson brings home a win with Gardevoir over our current reigning world champion, Fernando Cifuentes, with Blissey. Rounding out top 8, we've got Yurko Valencia making another top cut with Terrabox, Caleb Rogerson making another top cut with Dragapult Goldengo, Grant Shen making another top cut with Dragapult Goldengo, Eder Hario making top cut with Dragapult, Tyler Matthews making cut with that Joltik box, Tanner Hurley making his back-to-back top 8 with straight Dragapult, and Victor Arano rounding out our asymmetrical top cut with Raging Bolt. And so just to look at some of these lists We've got the winning list coming in here from Brent, and it's going to look a little bit different from Henry's deck from last week, right? We don't
Yeah.
see that Zoroark. We see just bulked up 4 copies of Stretcher, no Super Rod, and 4 copies of Research. We don't see any of those Mortys hanging out in here. And it looks like Brent just wanted to go fast and get his cards on the table.
Yeah, no boss, just the 2 counter catcher. I think no boss might be more standard in Guardy. I can't remember if Henry played boss.
Yeah,
I don't
that
think
one
he
I'd have
did.
to go back and double check.
But yeah, this is a very just not different, but just more streamlined is a good way to put it. You're running Cleffa for early game setup. Just trying to dig, I guess, to find that turn 2 or turn 3 Gardevoir faster. And then the secret box with no Arven in this list. So you're literally just trying to draw into that Candy Gardevoir or just draw into the setup for all those things. And you're cool just hanging out, with a bunch of monkeys, moving the damage over to your opponent.
Sure.
This is a very good comeback deck. You don't run the unfair stamp, but you still have a lot of counterplay with this. Just I mean, this is pretty bare bones. This is pretty, when you think of Guardy, this is the lowest common denominator kind of thing, where there's not a lot of moving parts to go wrong. But there's still enough tricks, like 3 Monkey Dory, 3 Dark, 3 Earthen Vessel. You can find pretty easy access to Dark Energy and Monkey Dory to counteract a lot of the Dragapults and to work really well in the mirror. I think 3 Monkey is a necessity in this format. You just can't get away with 2. We've even seen that in other decks like Hop Station and all that kind of just running 3 Monkey. But yeah, Monkey Dory. This deck just highlights the strength of Monkey Dory. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway.
Yeah. Well, and Gardevoir's always been kind of the deck that's best at utilizing Monkey Dory just because it's able to damage itself so efficiently.
Yeah, it would seem like it would be a downside, right, when you put damage counters on you yourself, but Gardevoir just finds a way to oh no, I can just pick off stuff a lot easier and set up math really well and avoid taking knockouts that activate Pheasantipity and avoid taking knockouts that make my Iono stronger for me and all these kind of things, and allow me to use counter catcher more effectively. So you're a good player will be able to use Monkey Dory really, really effectively and just line up a bunch of KOs and create a board state that really just benefits them. I mean, realistically, with this deck, you have the Clefairy, they have 3 main attackers and then Gardevoir, obviously, but that's it. You don't have a lot. The recovery of 4 Night Stretchers is really key to just be able to find those pieces when you need to, especially when you're playing so many research. But yeah, there's no Poffin in this. There's no Arven. There's no, it's really just a kind of a throwback if you've been playing long enough. It feels more like a stage 2 deck of old, like a Darkrai Hydra Gun or something like that.
4 Juniper, 4 N, and hope you get there.
Yeah, that's the vibe we got, right? This is definitely 4 Juniper, 4 N, and then it's pretty funny.
I mean, notably, this is the same list that Brent brought last week to Atlanta, with the only difference being that in Atlanta he had 3 counter catcher and did not have the Turo. So decided that cut and inclusion were worth making independent of each other. I think the interesting exclusion, more so than the onboard draw of the Zoroark, is the lack of the Mew EX. You've got the 3 Bravery Charm to kind of put it out of the Dragapult range. We've seen how powerful that Mew Clefairy combo can be into Dragapult specifically. And, even in some other matchups, kind of like Terrabox, it could be pretty not oppressive, but impressive as well. Being able to copy Torrential Pump, being able to copy opposing Clefairies, being able to copy the Demolish off of Cornerstone. Just different ways to get around these kind of hurdles. Mew is able to really tackle a lot of them. And I'm just a little surprised to not see it here, especially since it also offers that supplemental draw on board.
Right. Yeah, I guess maybe Brent was just saying, okay, it's a liability at the end of the day. I can afford to have all these 1 prizers and then play a game where all my only 2 prizer players Gardevoir,
sure,
for the most part. And maybe in his mind it's like a win more card in the Dragapult matchup.
Yeah, maybe.
There's just not enough scenarios. Like if you have Clefairy and then just swing with Gardevoir, you're doing a one shot on Dragapult, and like
Yeah,
you don't get the cool snipe something on the bench and knock out the active play, but like taking out the Dragapult, especially if you do it early enough when their setup's not enough, and then you Iono, like if you're taking it out and Ionoing him, they can really struggle to like get a follow up Dragapult with any real sense of urgency.
sure, sure. Well, and speaking of decks that kind of maybe wanted to put the kibosh on Dragapult, we do get to see Fernando's Blissey deck here. And this, when Blissey was first revealed in Twilight Masquerade, we saw a lot of people trying it out with the express purpose of shutting down what we thought was the impending Dragapult meta at the time. So I guess it shouldn't really be a surprise since we've hit that critical mass of Dragapult meta to see something like Blissey come back out and have some success. And if we just look real quick at the matches that Fernando played, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5, and then so 6, maybe 7 Dragapult decks that you could argue that he played against, and tied to beat the rest of them. I mean, it can't really be too surprising that this deck would be something that he'd choose to go with. And at this point, Fernando kind of seems like the king of off the wall meta calls for events.
Yeah,
We've got Blissey here, we had Iron Thorns at Worlds, and I think secretly Tech TM Turbo Energize might just be Fernando's favorite card.
I can see that. Yeah, it's a very cool list. Definitely not something that my mind went to. I mean, it makes like it's cool to see like as soon as I saw like I didn't see it until the finals when I tuned in and I'm like, oh, Blissey's in the finals, and I'm like, okay, I guess that makes a lot of sense. It's one of those decks that takes advantage of stuff that if you can't one shot a Blissey, he's not going anywhere. Like he's got a bunch of HP. He's really easy to heal and like manipulate energy to where even if you do start to knock out that Blissey, you can be like, all right, we will switch in and put another Blissey in, or like find a way to, make sure that he doesn't just die right immediately,
Sure.
or get knocked out immediately. But yeah, this is a really cool list. I liked a lot of the inclusions here. It seems pretty focused around Arvin as a build. Getting that turn 1 Precious Trolley to help your setup is really important. And then, yeah, just using Ultra Ball to find all the other Pokemon. 4 Pokegears seems like a lot, but I guess it's getting to the point where you just want to find those supporters you want to find the boss's orders when you need them. You want to find that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the town store engine is kind of cool too. You can get the turbo energize easier. Rigid Band helps fix a lot of the math against Dragapult.
Yeah.
Makes it harder for them to two shot you essentially. If you have the Rigid Band and then like 2 Monkey Dory, there's like no easy way for them to two shot you. So yeah, that's pretty nice.
Oh yeah. I mean, you also deny the Pikachu one hit KO with that.
True.
Which can definitely be pretty big.
Yep. Yeah, I'm sure that came up in the Terra Box matchup in top 4. So yeah, it's cool. Definitely not a deck I thought would be in this tournament. He's running 10 energy, which seems like a lot but I guess it makes sense if you're not running special energy. That's where we're at now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes sense. Interesting that he didn't do like a trumpet or something like that with the Ogre Pawn, but I could see. I guess it just doesn't really pay dividends to put the Ogre Pawn in play when you don't need to. So that makes sense.
Maybe,
I guess.
maybe. I think that I don't remember who
Or
I was
like a
talking to about
Crispin or
this.
something like that. I guess you had the TMM Turbo Energize, but there were times in the finals where he had his only Blissey knocked out and had no response for
Right.
even a Drifloon. So that was tough.
Yeah, the Gardevoir matchup in particular doesn't seem super great for this deck. Just
Yeah.
because they can even get around your Rigid Band by, plopping the 30 damage on you and then hitting you for 300, which
Yeah.
conveniently lets them clear you. And you don't really have a wall answer to that deck. I guess
No.
maybe you just hope you kind of run them over. But I don't know. That seems like a bit of a stretch, especially
Yeah.
under something like BUDEW. But maybe if they've got a series of turns where they only have one Ralts in play, we are playing 4 boss in here. And if you can just go boss, 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 and maybe that's enough to get you over the line. But still seems like a bit of a stretch in my mind.
Yeah,
But
it's cool to see
everything's good.
something that's anti-meta do well. I
Yeah,
mean, especially this early in a format, it's rare that we'll see somebody come up with a counter deck. But I mean, after Atlanta, when day 2 is 25% Dragapult, and then we look at this tournament, it's 25% day 1. I mean, it makes sense to have a deck that's just specifically to be Dragapult, and like
sure.
if you get lucky, and you know Fernando did. He hit more Dragapults than he hit anything else. You can take advantage of that. Good matchup. But yeah, this will be interesting to see where Blissey goes from here. But we'll talk about that a little bit more as
Yep.
let's look in the other decks.
Yep.
I can talk about this one a little bit.
Yeah, go
It
for
was
it.
so crazy because like this happened, and then at the league challenge I hosted, I had I think 2 or 3 players playing this Joltik deck, so that was kind of cool. It's crazy to see like how fast the community responds to um, how what does well at tournaments. Like I was working at the card store that I sort bulk at a lot of the time today, and like somebody came in and literally bought like a playset of Gardevoir and a playset of Blissey, and I'm like, all right, it's just so funny. Like Blissey wasn't on anybody's radar now. Like now it's like, and then speaking of not on anybody's radar, like this Galvantula, like I was pulling stuff out of bulk, and I'm like, oh, I guess I got to start pulling this Galvantula out now. But
This was
this
a
is a cool.
GLC card, John.
True. I guess I forgot about that. Yeah. This is a cool deck. So instead of using, so we lost a lot with Maridon after rotation. So this slows it down and kind of reevaluates the strategy a little bit. So instead of using Turbo Energize in this build, we're using Joltik, which has a pretty good attack. Jolting Charge. It's for 1 colorless. Search your deck for up to 2 basic grass cards and up to 2 basic lightning cards and attach them to your Pokemon any way you like. So you can get 4 energy out of your deck and just attach them wherever you want to put them. And that's probably the most powerful energy acceleration attack I can think, especially on a basic
For
that
sure.
I can think of. It does have the downside of having 30 hit points, but I mean, realistically, like that's fine. Like you put it up
Yeah.
there, attach turn 2 or turn 1, and then you're set up. Like so, and notably, like the things you're setting up are the main 2 are Iron Hands and Pikachu EX. And Iron Hands, has amp you very much. And we were talking, I think I've heard on a couple different podcasts over the last few weeks, like what's the best deck to use Iron Hands, and people have bounced around different ideas. Well, this seems kind of like the best way to use Iron Hands. If you get the turn 1 Jolting Charge and to the turn 2 amp you very much, and then you just keep building your board up from there. Like it's very, very hard for any deck, like especially these setup decks that take a long time, that even if they run BUDEW, you're just like, okay, cool, amp you very much with BUDEW,
Yeah.
take 2 prizes, okay, and then now what? Like what are you gonna do to respond to all that? Unfair stamp, okay, cool, knock out whatever you put up after unfair stamp for 2 prizes. Like I think it'll take somebody like maybe a tech inclusion of a Mimikyu or something like that to deal with this, but that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. But yeah, just any deck that can abuse the very, very strong attack of Amp You very much, like this will do really well in this meta that's dominated by Dragapult and Gardevoir. And then the other attack, if it's not Gardevoir or Dragapult, it's probably a big hit point, stage 1 or EX Pokemon. And then Pikachu can deal with that. And Pikachu has Prismat. What is it? Something Bolt.
Topaz Bolt.
Topaz Bolt for 300 damage. And 2 of the 3 energy are fulfilled by Jolting Charge, the lightning and the grass. And all you need to do is find a metal energy, and you run just enough resources with 4 Crispin to almost guarantee that. So yeah, this is a well thought out idea. I'm surprised we didn't really see this come up in Atlanta.
I think that same week or same weekend, maybe it had kind of just started to pop up in city leagues, and in a lot of ways, a lot of the Western meta often gets informed by Japan. I know Sejun Park also played it to the Korean League the same weekend as Atlanta, so it was just an idea that maybe had not quite had enough time to incubate and catch on. And people didn't necessarily want to fully innovate heading into Atlanta, would rather stick with what they knew.
Yeah. Well, either way, the rest of it will round out the list. It has the kind of other counter for Dragapult. Once they do get that Dragapult set up, you still have the Clefairy EX to be able to knock it out with weakness. And then I think the coolest inclusion is probably the Iron Leaves.
Sure.
Just being able to like clean up all this energy that you spread out early. A lot of times energy gets stuck on your Iron Hands, and you really don't want to hit for 160 with arm press. So you can just use Rapid Veneer, and I think how much damage does Iron
180.
Leaves do? 180. So a little bit more damage, but just a clean attacker primarily is what it's nice to have. And then you can also do the future booster capsule on the Iron Leaves to kind of give it free retreat, which is nice to like be able to reset something. I mean, this deck makes a lot of sense. Heavy Crispin engine, and then you can still cheese with Maractus, I guess, for a corner.
Yeah, that I haven't figured out
Yeah.
specifically what matchup Tyler has that included for, because I know Maractus does not exist in every list, and I've seen some interesting variations of this deck, like the Galvantula is not always included. Obviously,
Sure.
it's a great Mimikyu answer. Also, one hit KO's Melodic EX. The other neat thing I've seen some lists that opt to cut one of these energies down by one, add a fighting, and play one Galvantula EX as well.
Oh, okay.
Which is just a neat attacker. And the cool thing about playing either the baby Galvantula or the EX is that you transform that 30 HP liability on your board away from being a free prize to your opponent into something that can actually notably do some damage. And the baby Galvantula is kind of an unsung card. Hasn't seen any play in standard prior to this, but and for those of you who don't know what it does, its ability is Compound Eyes that says attacks from this Pokemon do 50 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon that has an ability, and then its Shocking Web attack does 50 damage for a grass and a colorless, but if it has any lightning energy attached, it does an additional 80 damage. So if you're hitting an ability laden Pokemon with Shocking Web, you're doing 180 damage, and because a lot of Pokemon are weak to grass in the current meta, you can one-hit KO a lot of those Pokemon. Notably, things like Charizard, Hydreigon, and Zoroark. Not all of those are super relevant, but just when you have a Joltik sitting on your bench that you could potentially retreat back and have an energy just sitting on it all game, to have that thing potentially turn into a threat at some point is pretty noteworthy. And worst case, you could also one-hit KO something like a Mew with this, even though it's not weak to grass, and then you have a one-prizer sitting in your active that your opponent has to deal with.
Yeah, or Squawkabilly or something like that. That's
For sure.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a cool list. It'll be interesting to see. Like, I mean, I think players will gravitate towards this. It seems like a fun deck list. But yeah, I like this list a lot. So definitely cool to see Tyler. He's always kind of coming up with crazy cool stuff. He's played he was a big Entei Iron Valiant player for a while. Played Banette with Dusknoir when Dusknoir first came out. So that was kind of cool to see. So yeah, definitely
and
cool.
I think a lot of people have been just looking for a way to people want to play Pikachu.
Sure.
Like, it is such a blatantly powerful card if you can set it up easily. And this is a deck that reasonably, if you tandem unit for 2 Pikachus on turn 1, you could Jolting Charge and have 2 Pikachus that have a Lightning and a Grass sitting on them on your bench on turn 1. And your opponent has to figure out how to deal with that. But like you said, John, and a lot of the matchups where that doesn't fit, the deck is able to compensate for that and instead go the Iron Hands route. And Iron Hands can be super oppressive into some of these evolving decks.
For sure. Yeah, especially if everything's focused on BUDEW and taking a little longer. This is kind of like an answer to that in a lot of ways. Right. It's like, well, if we're going to go slow, okay, I'll play a Pokemon that's just a setup Pokemon and set up my board and be perfectly happy with not playing items, because whenever I can, or whenever I'm set up, like Pikachu can be fully loaded with 6 energy and I can get 2 attacks with 300 damage off before we really even have to do anything. And your opponent doesn't often have an answer for something because they can't one-shot Pikachu. So here we are.
Which is
kind
cool.
of yeah, definitely. I'm not saying that
we haven't seen a setup attack be successful in Pokemon in quite a while.
Right.
So it's nice to see something like this actually have success in a modern tournament at a major level.
100%. So definitely cool to see. A couple other lists we can go through real quick. We have Tanner Hurley getting another top 8 right after his Atlanta performance. I think this is the same 60, right?
No, he didn't play Jacques last week.
Oh, okay,
So that
sorry.
was one change. I don't know specifically what he cut from here to make the two Jacques fit. I think maybe there's an Arvin missing and then one other card, but notably two Jacques in here now.
Yep. Still
Just
running the Genesect with the Aspect neutralizer or
yep.
whatever.
Oh, and he's actually got two tools for his Bedews to become beefier now. So just
Oh,
really
yeah.
looks like he's trying to win that mirror match.
Yeah, I played a little bit with the Hedrick list yesterday after the challenge.
Sure.
Luxurious Cape is I was totally underrating it, especially I liked it in the Dustnor build a lot because you can put it on a Duskull turn 1, and then basically prevent it from being knocked out. And then once you blow it up with as a Dustnor, like your opponent doesn't take their extra prizes from
Right.
Luxurious Cape. So it's only when they're not when it's knocked out from damage that they draw those extra prizes. So it's pretty relevant. So yeah, I definitely am coming around a little bit on Luxurious Cape. At first, I've always like, ugh, giving up an extra prize is not fun, but there's enough scenarios where like that's fine. Like you either it never comes up or it's done its job. You know.
Right. For sure. Yeah, the only time that it's really bad is if you somehow manage to get in a position where like your 130 HP Bedew is getting knocked out by a Bedew, and then you're in a bad way. But
Yeah.
theoretically that shouldn't happen very often.
No, I can't imagine that comes up a whole lot.
But
But
yeah,
yeah, it's just very consistent. You know, not running the Dust Snore. Yeah, definitely has answers to most of the questions being asked by different things in the meta. With the Halucha, with the Genesect, and then with the late game Blood Moon Ursaluna to close it out. Just the one Monkey Door I think is enough, and then definitely run on the Legacy energy build, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I don't know. Definitely
yeah.
cool to see.
I heard some interesting math earlier that I hadn't thought about, and the idea of playing Luminous in this deck as opposed to playing a Dark Energy, and how it theoretically, if you attach a Luminous to a Dracloak on a given turn, you actually have more outs to hitting the energy you need to attack with a Dragapult the following turn than you would in a Dust Noir based deck, where you attach a fire. You've only got 3 psychics, whereas if I attach a Luminous, I have 2 fires or 2 psychics that all fulfill my requirements. So if I theoretically have more outs to hit what I need off of my recon directives the following turn. So just more credence to playing Luminous as
Mm,
opposed to playing another fire, another psychic, and one dark. Like,
yeah,
yeah, you can't search it, which is a downside, but you have the kind of more power as opposed to more searchability.
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah,
pretty
that's cool.
nifty list. Would not be at all surprised to see it continue to have success moving forward.
Yeah, I think it'll adapt well. You can kind of tech it for whatever you need it to kind
Yep.
of handle.
We do have one more list in Masters to look at, and that is Raul Avila Jr.'s Roaring Moon to Dunsparce. And this is a deck that, after it saw some kind of middling success, albeit, some decent success, I should say. We did have a top cut at EUIC last year. I think a 9th or 10th place at Orlando Regionals the following weekend that same season. The deck just fell off the face of the earth and nobody wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole until this weekend. And the deck almost managed to squeak into that asymmetrical cut, being just one place shy. And honestly, I could not tell you why it was successful. This is a deck that I actually chose to pilot back when I feel it was more powerful. We obviously had Dark Patch last season. We've lost that card, and in its place, Raul opted to play 4 Great Balls in the deck. And the only thing I can imagine from looking at this deck list as a whole is that Raul won a lot of games on the back of Neutralization Zone.
Yeah,
And so that Aspect Stadium that prevents all damage done to your non-rule box Pokemon by your opponent's rule box Pokemon
yeah,
is, potentially pretty powerful. A lot of people aren't playing stadiums right now. And a lot of the decks that do play stadiums are opting into these research-based builds. So there is a half decent chance that your opponent will get rid of all of their stadium outs, and you can just stick a neutralization zone and use Vengeance Fletching until you win the game.
yeah. I mean, this is such a crazy build. I played a little bit with the Dunsparce deck online over the last 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't feel fun. Uh, just so many games where like if you get Iona in mid game, you just if you don't see the Dunsparce, like if they get all shuffled to the bottom of the deck, there's not easy ways to search out stage ones. I guess Great Ball is where we're at now, which is crazy to me. Like running 4 Ultra Ball makes sense because you're trying to discard ancients, and then yeah, you can search out whatever you need. But the 4 Great Ball, man, that seems just wild to me. I don't know. Like I guess logistically it makes the most sense. Like especially later on, as if you thin out all the ancient Pokemon, all the other cards, and you're just trying to find the Dunsparce. Like I guess once your deck gets to a certain point, you keep shuffling in Dunsparce into Dunsparce, it's more effective. So that'd be the way to look at it, right? Like once your deck's like 20 cards and like 4 of those 20 are hits for the Dunsparce or Dunsparce,
Yeah.
that's cool. But I don't know, man. It just feels pretty bad in my mind. I mean, this is a cool list. Like, it's cool that we see something with neutralization zone. I think if you scroll, like, look at the top, it has to be one of the cheapest lists that's ever done well
Yeah,
at a
17
regionals.
bucks.
$17, baby. I mean, you're a new player. Here you go. Like, for the price of like Chipotle at this point, like you've got a competitive list, I
Yeah.
guess. So that's cool. Definitely a beginner friendly deck, I'd say. So that's pretty
Oh,
cool.
definitely. Attach player supporter and attack. Like you don't have
Yeah,
fancy monkey dory math to worry about. You're not worried about attacking with the right Pokemon. Like realistically, it's almost always correct to vengeance fletching unless you need to frenzied gouging whatever your opponent's active
right.
is. I think the trickiest thing with this deck now that we don't have Dark Patch is understanding the right time to bench the EX so that you can get it powered up reasonably in one turn. Just because the idea that you're going to push a Dunsparce up, play a Sada, energy switch that energy from one ancient guy back to the Roaring Moon EX, and then attach from your hand when you're only playing 6 energies is kind of asking a lot. The one thing that this deck did gain that it did not used to have is access to Fan Rotom, but
Mm,
and I would feel better about this as a concept if the Dunsparce itself also had 100 HP.
right. That's still like it's okay. Like it doesn't it's you can Poffin, like it runs 4 Poffin, which is crazy, right? Like that shows you where we're at. Like it doesn't run Nest Ball, it runs 4 Poffin. So like I I don't know, man. I got nothing. This was baffling me. But I guess the 4 Poffin is like I want to hit Poffin turn one. That way I can just go, okay, Fan Rotom to Dunsparce, and then use Fan Rotom to get the other two to Dunsparce. And at that point you're no longer a Roaring Moon deck, you're a Dunsparce deck. But I mean, I guess you just want to amass a large hand size and start thinning your deck out as fast as possible with your Earthen Vessels and Ultra Balls,
Yeah,
and going from there. I mean, yeah, you just don't need a lot. You can burn through this deck really, really quick. Um, and yeah, I mean, I guess that's it. That's
I
really
think
what it comes
I
down
think
to.
the games where this deck pops off, it probably looks amazing
Yeah,
and can probably pretty reasonably run decently well under an item lock. And then you'll have other games where you just look at it and you don't know what you're doing
yeah. It's
for
like
the entire game.
I don't know how this beats. Like we just looked at Tanner Hurley's deck. Like I don't know how this deck beats that deck. You know what I mean?
And
Like
realistically, it probably doesn't. Like back last
yeah,
year, one of this deck's hardest matchups was Charizard. And that kind of Dragapult deck really occupies a very similar space to what Charizard used to occupy, where you've just got a giant stage 2 EX Pokemon that's going to be very difficult for you to knock out with anything outside of using Frenzied Gouging. And now that deck also has access to being able to counter catcher your EX to the bench and KO it with sprinkle damage, potentially, if you don't
yeah,
have a capsule available. That's not something you really want to sign up for.
yeah. I mean, Capsule helps at least fix some of that math, but
Sure.
like I don't know, man. Like it doesn't feel good in my mind. Like you're if I sit across the table as a Dragapult player against this deck, I'm like, great. If I set up, I feel pretty good about this matchup because
Right.
especially if you run Halucha, you're able to like manipulate damage really really well. Um, on the Dunsparce, and if you can go like Iono, Halucha, knockout, like, and then kill their draw engine, and then leave them with like no energy in play. I don't know. it's going to be tough. So
And you just playing around the neutralization zone.
that's the biggest factor. I gotta say, I'm sure that came up a lot in Dragapult, especially when they only run like 1 or 2 stadiums. If that's I don't know. I think Tanner's List might have ran a stadium. I don't even remember if it does.
I think it had Artisan.
Yeah, they usually run like 1 or 2 Artisan. But yeah, this stadium neutralization zone. Let's see. Yeah, two Artisan. So you can get away with it sometimes. Like if the first game 1, if the player discards 2 Artisan as a Dragapult player, you can like, all right, neutralization zone, and if they're not able to respond, GG. I feel like that's definitely a win condition. But
sure,
at a regionals, like I don't know, man. It seems I'm props to Raul. Like it's still pretty cool that he did well with it. I would be surprised to see this make a top cut appearance once again anytime soon.
I mean, he was 8-0-1 going into
that is
day
pretty
2.
Impressive. Wow.
Or sorry, 7-0-1. 7.
He beat Roth.
Still. Yeah, beat
the
Brent. Eventual winner. Well, okay, Gardevoir seems like a good matchup, I should say.
Yeah,
like Gardevoir's always been a decent matchup for Roaring Moon based decks. Yeah. It's pretty easy to boss the Gardevoir up in KOA. And when that's a matchup because you're trading with 1 prize attackers, you're totally fine going into that.
Yeah, and I feel like definitely has pretty good Golden Go matchup.
Yeah.
Because like you're able to 2-shot Golden Go effectively, and then like you can trade 1-for-1 with the Roaring Moon, big guy, later on pretty effectively.
Sure.
So, yeah, I guess didn't hit a whole lot of Dragapult from looking at that, right?
No.
So I think that's part of it. Is just getting lucky with not hitting a lot of Dragapult, which.
But hey, that's tournaments.
That's what it takes. Yeah, man. So
that's tournaments for sure. And then the last thing to look at is a seniors result, and this is a repeat winner and repeat deck list from last week's regional. So we have Justin Templar coming in once again with another regional win with Dragapult Dusknoir, the same list that he and Andrew Hedrick piloted last weekend to a first and second place, respectively, in the seniors and masters division. Justin said, you know what, this deck list is so good, I'm going to go to Mexico and win another tournament.
Yeah, it's interesting to see like just the dominance of some of the seniors this year. We were talking before the podcast, like Justin, this is his 4th regional win. He's like, I think he said he looked at his like placements, at least all the ones that were on Limitless. He's top cut at every single one of them. He's got like I think a really good IC record at this point. So he's not like if was it Vinny? If Vinny Fernandez is the senior?
No, Gabriel.
I mix them up. I apologize. If Gabriel Fernandez wasn't like currently smashing seniors, like Justin would definitely have the title of like best senior of the year. It's but like definitely best North American senior so far.
Sure.
And it's cool to see him run it back with basically the same list. Him and Hedrick Hedrick gave him a shout out at the winners interview or whatever. So definitely cool to see his kind of brainchild do really well. And yeah, if it worked the first time, if you get the dub the first time, why not just run it back? So props. It's still cool to see. It's so cool to see somebody has that much confidence in their ability and their deck choice and all that stuff. And this is a cool list. I know I played a little bit with it yesterday, like I said. And it flows really well. Like it has a lot of answers. I think the 2 Jock really help against item lock, like thinning out the Arvin count. And then, just the unfair stamp is definitely the best ace spec right now for Dragapult. When you can just go kind of catch your unfair stamp and then BUDEW or just, whatever, any of those things. So, yeah, very cool.
Absolutely. So, yeah, that's going to close the books on Monterey heading into or closing out this past weekend. And before we get into how we think things might shape up going into this weekend and moving forward, John has a little bit of a detour for us.
I just wanted to take a look at an older list. This is John Roberts II's 2012 list from Nationals that year. And we looked at a rogue deck in Blissey that was tanky and healed. And this is very similar. It doesn't heal, I guess is the wrong way to say it, but uses Monkey Dory to essentially remove damage from its side. And this was a little bit of a different concept, but the same kind of premise in a lot of ways. You're moving around energy, and then using a myriad of different attackers to hit for weakness across the board. So this was a really cool deck when it came out. This was a rogue deck at this Nationals. He beat, I think, Kevin Nance in the finals, who was playing, I think Zek Eels, Mewtwo Eels. But yeah, I just wanted to look at this real quick. So for those that aren't too familiar with this format, we talked about the 4N for research. This is before we had, I think Sycamore research was in format.
Well, yeah, it just was called Professor Juniper at the time.
Yeah, exactly. But this didn't play Juniper, mostly because you're running such thick stage 2 lines here that you don't really want to discard a lot of this stuff. It ran 4 Professor Oak's New Theory, which was a shuffle and then draw 6. And then Copycat, which is shuffle and then draw for your opponent's hand size. And then 4 N. N's definitely the workhorse of this deck, to just kind of allow you to come back from pretty far down. So the star of the show in my mind in this deck is the Shift Gear Cling Clang. So the Shift Gear came out in the black and white base set. It has the ability Shift Gear. As long as you like, during your turn before you attack, you may move a metal energy attached to one of your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon. So energy trans is like another way to put it. We've seen this ability printed a number of times. It's not currently in our format. The most recent iteration of it, I think, was Aromatisse that did well. Maybe there's one that I'm missing. We really haven't seen it too recently.
Yeah, it's been a little bit.
Yeah, but this is definitely one of those cards that, we had a Hydreigon that did the same thing. If you go all the way back to Jungle or base set, we had, was it Blastoise? Or not Blastoise. Venusaur. That's what I meant. One of the other starters that had that same kind of ability. But this normally is an okay ability, but what really makes this good is the fact that we had some really good special energy in this format. We have Prism Energy and Rainbow Energy. Prism Energy is basically any type of energy, but only on basic Pokemon. So this provides colorless, but if it's attached to a basic Pokemon, this card provides every type of energy, but only one energy at a time. So any, like, similar to Luminous Energy, but just on basic Pokemon. And then Rainbow is probably the strongest variant of this gimmick. Rainbow is every energy type, where the only downside of being it places one damage counter whenever you attach it from hand to one of your Pokemon. So what is usually a downside isn't really too effective. Like, it doesn't really impact this deck for a couple different reasons. The Shift Gear ability allows you to just put it on something that you don't really care too much about and then move it off. So where that damage can just stay on something that doesn't make a huge difference. And then the other one being this deck really utilizes one of the most broken cards in my mind of this era, Max Potion, really, really effectively. Max Potion is an item card, which is crazy. And it just says heal all damage for one of your Pokemon, then discard all energy attached to that Pokemon. So if you guys know anything about that combo of being able to move energy off, heal all damage, I think you're kind of getting at what I'm getting at. You can see where this deck really takes over. So in addition to the Shift Gear, we have just a bunch of stuff that keeps it alive a little longer. We have 4 copies of Eviolite, which is a tool that reduces any damage done to your Pokemon by 20 damage. So just turns all of your beefy is relative here. So 180 was the max amount of hit points we had on a basic pretty much in this era. And you're running 2 copies of Darkrai, 2 copies of Groudon, 1 copy of Kyogre with 170 Shaman EX, which you're running for Keldeo, I believe, at this point. Maybe it's a little too early for that. Yeah, I think Keldeo.
No, Keldeo's not out yet. No.
Must have been. Let me see.
I mean, specifically, if your opponent's taken 5 prizes, at that point you do 180.
Okay, so just as a big hitter. Yeah. It might be a late game closer. if you will. And then Cobalions are your good one prize attacker to swing into stuff with Safeguard. But Darkrai, it's probably the main attacker in a lot of scenarios. It has a really good ability that gives all your Pokemon with dark energy attached to them free retreat. And since Rainbow and Prism count as dark energy, everything gets free retreat, which is nice. And then it has Night Spear, which for 2 dark and a colorless does 90 and then 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So this could just really set up math really well and work towards getting your other Pokemon to be able to do really well. Groudon EX, which wasn't really played that much in this era, but this was played in this deck as a Darkrai counter because Giant Claw, it basically you could set it up to where you put 30 damage on a Darkrai, and then Giant Claw just one shot that Darkrai, one shot it. So as long as your defending Pokemon already had 2 or more damage counter, it does 40 more damage. So yeah, you're just doing a lot of damage with this. And then Trump was pretty good too. It set up math a lot really well into some certain matchups. But the card that was the star of the show in the finals was Kyogre EX, which this card's not that great if I'm honest. But in this specific meta, Dual Splash did a lot of work. So against the Eels deck, Dual Splash, it's just for water color, it does 50 damage to your opponent's Pokemon. And so you can just pick off the electrics on the bench. And not a lot can really deal with this effectively. The Eels deck did hit it for weakness, but that wasn't as big a factor when Mewtwo was your main attacker. And that was more where you were centered off. I think the Eels deck did run a Zekrom, but yeah, it didn't really get it going all that well, if I remember correctly. Dual Splash just kind of put in a lot of work. But yeah, that's pretty much the premise. A lot of the other stuff, if you're not too familiar with this format, is pretty standard. We see 3 copies of Junk Arm, so 1 less than the max, probably because you don't want to be discarding a whole lot, but you still want access to the really strong effective Junk Arm, which is discard 2 cards, and then you can get back any trainer card, which was a Rattata item. So you could just get back your max potions, and then you could also get back Broken Pokemon Catcher, which is similar to our current Pokemon Catcher, but the effect of having to flip a coin does not exist. You just bring something up to the active, so you can boss's orders on an item card. So a very, very broken card that really just makes this deck so much stronger. You could just strand something active and go crazy with Kyogre and just pick off stuff off the bench and that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It is interesting that this was a list that when I remember me and my brother were watching the finals, we had no clue who John Roberts was. He was a player from the Midwest that we had never heard of. And we were just like, clang, clang, that's great. Like, it just blew our minds that this deck did well. So I guess a lot of similar people might have, or in a similar vein, a lot of people probably had the same reaction when they saw Blissey yesterday on the stream in the finals. They're like, Blissey, that makes no sense. It's a little more name recognition with Fernando, but John Roberts is a solid player in his own right. I think he's, I don't think he's ever matched this performance, but
No.
definitely, I think had some deep runs in tournaments after this.
Yeah.
So definitely a cool deck to feature. Definitely a cool deck if you ever go back and play this format. It's a pretty fun deck to play. All the Energy Trans decks are really fun. Like, they kind of challenge you to think about resource management and like energy placement and all that kind of stuff. So,
Well, and they let you do toolboxy stuff in a little bit of a different way. The other cool thing about this deck in general is that it can leverage Heavy Ball in a way that most other decks couldn't. And that's an item card that we haven't really seen a ton of since then. And so just an item card lets you search your deck for any Pokemon that had a retreat cost of 3 or more. And so notably, the Groudon EX, Kyogre EX, and the entirety of the Klinklang line all have at least 3 retreat. So you're fetching out your engine card for utilizing all your Pokemon, as well as 2 of your more central attackers. And then to keep your big beefy basics alive a lot longer, the deck leveraged 4 copies of the Eviolite tool card to make them all take minus 20 damage from every single attack. And generally, reactive cards like this aren't super great in the TCG, but at the time, there wasn't really a way to get around these Pokemon aside from just catchering around them. So if you just put an Eviolite on every single one of your attackers, well, your opponent's not going to be able to really get like the way to beat this deck is to get the energy out of play. And if you can stop that from happening, well, then what's your opponent going to do? And
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the strategy that John Roberts took on here by just implementing as much healing and as much damage absorption as he could into the deck.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting list. The idea of not playing any research, or sorry, Juniper at this time was definitely anti of this era.
Oh, for sure.
There's like another cool list I was looking at nationals from this year. Like Dylan Bryan, uh, who was also who's a really good player during this era, but ran Miss Magius. And I just want to give a shout out to this. This kind of mimics what we saw in Blissey with Magical
Sure.
Trans. It says once during your turn, you can move a Psychic from one of your Pokemon to another Pokemon. So similar to Kling Klang, but this is like more of a slower, tanky version that relied on Vileplume to disrupt, which is item lock. So this is another deck. Maybe we'll look at it another day from now. But this is a fun format. 2012 Nationals. The Worlds format's very, very different than this one, which is kind of crazy to see. It went from a lot of Mewtwo Eels to more of a Darkrai centric era. So
Yeah.
definitely interesting to see like how it changed even in that short amount of time, and focus more on like if you go and look at this, the main takeaway is people figured out that Smeargle exists and that it's pretty good in 2012. Because we have like all these lists that don't run Smeargle, and then you go to let's see Worlds for that year. Let's see if I can find it real quick. We're already all right, we're gonna here we go, 2012 World Championships. Yeah. So yeah, this is all Mewtwo Darkrai. And so like it's so funny to see like it goes from being such a varied meta to like a very homogenous meta. And all these lists I can guarantee are running Smeargle, which, wasn't really featured too much at that nationals. So very, very weird like era. But very cool in its own way. But yeah, I just thought this was a cool deck to talk about, as a rogue deck, not Igor's deck, sorry. Uh, John Roberts's Kling Klang deck. Very cool deck to look at. And yeah, I think this was very impactful in its own way. It showed that like rogue decks could do well for me. And this sparked the brainchild that I eventually took and won a states with in 2013 with Plasma Kling Klang. So maybe we'll talk about that another day from now. But yeah,
Sure.
that's our time capsule segment for today. And thank you for just indulging me as I take a trip down memory lane.
Of course. As we attempt to do as often as possible, because John and I are both old and we will never let each other forget that.
For sure, for sure.
But, speaking of getting old, as we all do one day, we are going to look a little bit in the future here. At the end of this week, we've got a couple of special events coming up, likely to be lesser attendance than the regionals that we've seen the past couple of weekends, of course. But wasn't sure, wanted to talk about the meta trends we've kind of seen and how we expect any shifts to happen, if we expect any shifts to happen moving into this weekend. So we've seen Gardevoir win the past 2 weeks. We've seen Dragapult be the number one deck both weekends going into day one and remaining in day two, even though we had an increase in day two in Atlanta and a decrease in day two in Monterey. And the question is Dragapult still going to be the most played deck? Is Gardevoir going to win another tournament? Are these rogue decks like Blissey and Joltik Box going to come out of the woodwork and see larger numbers going into this weekend and maybe disrupt some of those results? Or just in general, what do we think is going to happen? And so I'm going to let you lead off with this, John. What do you think we can glean from the results of the past 2 weeks as people head into this weekend?
Well, before we do that, I would need some housekeeping. I feel like just to recap our predictions for Monterey.
Oh, shoot. You're totally right.
Yeah, so we can maybe edit this into another segment earlier in the podcast. But if not, we can do it real quick just as a segue. So we did 3 predictions on an over and under. So we had said over under the number of BUDEW in Top Cut, and the over and under was 11.5. Do you have it handy?
I am pulling it up right now, so
All
if you can
right,
just
I'll
stall
let
for a
you.
second.
So you said over, and I said under 11.5 BUDEW.
So let's
And
see.
we had a decent amount of decks that didn't run BUDEW in my
One.
mind. We had the Joltik deck, we had Blissey, which didn't run BUDEW, we had some other stuff I'm trying to remember at the moment. I think the Raging
Yeah, you're
Bolt.
right. We had some Goldengo Dragapults, we had a Terra box, we had a Joltik box, we had a Raging Bolt, we had a Blissey, and the total number of Badoo in Top Cut, including asymmetrical cut, was 5.
Wow. So definitely a huge decrease. And I think that has a large part to do with not a lot of Dragapult being in Top Cut,
Sure.
and most of it being Dragapult Goldingo, which I think probably only runs one copy of Badoo for the most part.
Zero.
Okay,
Zero.
so even better. Like you got to figure out what to cut, and that's definitely one to cut there. So I won that one. The next one we had was the number of Mexican players. Sorry, non-Mexican players in Top Cut being over or under 6.5. And I said under.
And I said over.
You said
And we have
over.
a total of 2 Mexican players in asymmetrical Top Cut. We have 2 Chilean players helping bring that number down for us. So we've got a total of 7 Americans / Latam, other Latam, non-Mexican, and 1 Australian. So I guess maybe this wasn't necessarily the fairest question. Maybe we should have said the number of Latam players or number of non-Latam players
Yeah.
in asymmetrical cut. But I'm going to take the technicality and take
Yeah,
the
you'll
win on
take
that.
it. You'll take it. All right. And then the final ace question was what would be the winning ace spec for this tournament? And neither one of us thought Guardy would win
Nope.
again. So neither one of us picked the winning ace spec of Secret Box, which Aaron put Crystal, and I put, I think, the second place. What did BUDEW play? Oh, I played Trolley. Okay.
Yep. No,
So we have to
and
go
you
down
said
to
unfair stamp, right?
the top 4. I said
Third,
unfair stamp.
third place was playing Sparkling Crystal.
Okay. And other top 4?
Energy Search Pro.
Okay, so you win this one as well. So
Yes.
by technicalities, which we count those here on the Battle Frontier, Aaron wins this round of over and under. So
And we've learned a lesson about rephrasing our predictions to maybe be a little bit more accurate moving forward. Now that we've upkept the house, John,
yep.
what do you think about this meta and how it has evolved so far and played out? And what do you think it's going to do moving into this weekend?
So my first initial thought is all the people that wanted to ban BUDEW last weekend probably feel a little differently. Maybe they don't, but they should feel differently about that sentiment. We see Dragapult slide off a little bit, lose some of its ground. Which, I mean, if you look back at like new metas at new at tournaments right after new metas, like the one that comes to mind was like the Palkia dominance we saw right after rotation, like 2 years ago or something like that, when we had Palkia dominating top cuts. And like you could say the same thing about Lugia, I think, coming out of rotation this year. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but the format's in such a state of flux, and people don't really know what to play right away. And a lot of the lists are suboptimal, or looking at them, they're just not fully fleshed out. The meta's not established, but like once you do have an established meta, then you get to work. Then you're able to say, okay, well, if it's all Dragapult all the time, we can really play around that and play decks that take advantage of that matchup. And so we're seeing that now. We're seeing decks that say, okay, well, I'm going to start cutting some of my Arvins and playing Jacques, or decks don't run Arvin at all, don't run Nest Ball. You have the trolley, and then you're setting up turn 1, and then you're just going from there. So decks that really just take advantage of a BUDEW start, like you're able to like play the Joltik and have something to set up behind. So we're seeing those alternate strategies that don't really care about BUDEW come to the forefront, and that's really cool for me as a longtime player. It means that the players that have been playing a long time that don't get freaked out, don't throw their hands up in frustration, are getting rewarded, which is really cool. I'm excited to see. I think it's kind of like once you play that Blissey deck, once you play that Joltik deck, like the cat's out of the bag. Um, I don't know. I think the Joltik deck has some legs if
Sure.
Dragapult gets played a lot. Both of these decks do, truthfully. But like I don't know. I'm interested. I don't really see the staying power. Like they're not going to be, you know, tier 8, tier B, maybe tier B, but like probably tier C, which isn't a bad thing. It's just the reality of the situation. Like the power level of those two decks. I mean, the Joltik deck has a pretty high power level. I will say that, but the Blissey deck definitely doesn't have a high power level. It reminds me of like the worlds where Mega Audino won just because it was a meta call. Um, and that's kind of how it feels to me, the Blissey deck. But the Joltik deck, I think, has a little more legs and could see a lot more play, and I could see it doing pretty well moving forward.
Yeah, the Blissey deck in a lot of ways I think occupies the same lane as Straight Walls, or
Hmm.
maybe even something going back to worlds like Iron Thorns, where when you expect the meta percentage of the room to be so hyper concentrated and morphed around one specific deck, and you hope to hit that deck over and over and over throughout the day, when you successfully do hit that deck over and over and over throughout the day, you're going to have a great tournament run. When you don't, you're going to fall flat on your face. And it's the same reason we didn't see Walls be successful last week, and why I don't expect us to see Blissey be successful. Maybe it still would be this weekend, but I think by Milwaukee is where we'll see a shift where Blissey won't be in as good of a position as it would have been this past weekend or this coming weekend. The Joltik deck, like you said, I actually think is flexible enough that if people are kind of ahead of the curve with it and know which cards to include with it, like we said, you can choose to play that Galvantula or not play it. You can choose to play the Galvantula EX, which it's not the most powerful card in the world, but has the ability to one hit KO Clefairy, Mew, Pheasantipity, Squawkabilly, and a lot of things for 2 energy, or potentially do 180 damage and item lock your opponent, which is something that a lot of people just may not be prepared for. So you've got that tech option. You have the option to include neither of those cards and just include some other more consistency based cards in your deck if you're okay with just having a Joltik sitting on your bench the rest of the game. And obviously, Pikachu and Iron Hands are both very powerful cards. And if you're able to utilize them effectively, the deck can hit the ground running. And if your deck's not able to withstand that pressure early on, or is not able to counter pressure them well enough that they can't get going, you're probably in for a rough time. Interestingly, one of the decks that kind of gives that deck the hardest time can be something like Raging Bolt, especially
Mm-hmm.
the single prizer focused Raging Bolts that are running either multiple Baby Bolts or Baby Bolt and Koridon and Slitherwing. And Slitherwing in particular is the card that really can give that deck a hard time. And I'm not sure
Yeah,
if it
yeah.
has a way around it either.
No,
But
it really chews through Pikachu for sure.
exactly. But it's an interesting thing to see pop into the metagame, and I totally expect its meta percentage to increase over the next couple of weeks.
Mm.
But with that being said, we have to see some stuff kind of fall off for that to be the case, though, right? And if that's the
Yeah.
case, where are those hits coming from? Is it going to be the Raging Bolts that are falling by the wayside? Is it going to be the Dragapult percentage that just gets eaten into as people either feel less safe with the deck or are, again, less and less comfortable with just bringing the quote unquote best deck as it has continued to not be the winner at the end of the day?
I mean, yeah, I think we'll see some Dragapult fall off. I don't think 25% is sustainable, truthfully.
Sure.
Um, like that wouldn't surprise me if it comes down below 15 at some point. It's still really powerful. It's still considered like the strongest deck in format by a long shot. But like players are adapting their strategies to be able to beat it, and it has a huge target on its back. We're seeing people hard counter it right now, which we don't really see all that often in the Pokemon trading card game. Like especially the last few formats we've had, like Dragapult, like Regidrago had that kind of prestige, but even then, like we didn't see as much hard counters for it as some other decks we've seen in the past. So this is the first time in a while we've seen like hard counters. I could see some players migrating from Dragapult to other decks for sure this next few weeks. Like I could see Golden Go coming down maybe a little bit. It's still pretty good. Had some pretty good showing. We saw especially the Golden Go Dragapult deck do pretty
Yeah.
well in Monterey. So I could see maybe people moving from Golden Go to a Golden Go Dragon Pult to maybe deal with some of the weirder matchups like a um, like a Gardevoir that I might struggle with normally. I don't know. So definitely, I think Raging Bolt's always weird. This was a weird one for Raging Bolt. I think 10% is probably like where I expected to land at. Maybe a little bit higher, because it's still like the beginner friendly. Like this is your first regionals, you play Raging Bolt kind of thing, right?
Okay.
And there's a lot of those for the next few weeks that we have. And now like Europe's getting their turn, and um, Australia is getting their turn, so they might go back to playing some of the more new card friendly stuff we saw at Atlanta. So we might see some more Hopsation, some more Enzorark this weekend. I could see that kind of coming to the forefront too, and not converting super well. I still think the power level of those two decks is a little lacking, but I definitely could see some players just wanting to play the new cards. We'll see.
Yeah, I feel like one of those decks is almost there, and
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's the ends deck. Personally, like
Yeah.
the hops deck is it. It's kind of like the Raging Bolt of that set, where
Mm.
unfortunately, even though it's got some kind of tricks that it can do, because it's got the game plan of going from a two prizer to a one prizer to a one prizer to a one prizer to a two prizer to close out the game, and it's got a self-sustained prize map that's self-contained within its archetype that flows really well. It still is too linear in the sense that it's just like I'm going to hit you, and then I'm going to hit you again, and I'm going to hit you again, and then I'm going to hit you again. And oftentimes the 30 damage pings to the bench aren't enough off the back of a two prizer that can unfortunately be pretty easily one hit KO'd. Whereas when you get the ends deck, you have a toolboxy approach on the back of something that's got a beefy enough HP pool that it can sometimes be difficult for things to one hit KO. And in the matchups where it's easy to one hit KO, like Goldengo or Chaladon, for example, you can actually fall back on attacking with the one prizer in Darmanitan directly because both of those coincidentally are weak to that card. And speaking playing against the ends deck at Atlanta from the Goldengo perspective, I got pretty lucky that he prized Darumaka both games, and I
Wow.
didn't
Yeah.
have to deal with double Darumaka sitting on the bench at any point throughout my series. Um, because for the life of me, I feel like that matchup is pretty bad if your opponent is able to set up multiple Darmanitan on the bench to be a threat, and you're having to waste resources trying to chase them down rather than hitting these Zoroarks that are sitting in the active spot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think you're spot on with that analysis of which deck is stronger out of those two. I'd agree with that. And Zoroark, just having that built-in draw engine too, is so nice.
For
Trade.
sure.
We've missed you. We're so glad you're back. Like it's cool to see even in like non-standard Zoroark decks. We're seeing it trade pop up again, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
Definitely harkens back to a different era. But yeah, definitely some things to think about moving forward out of this weekend. Some cool rogue decks to maybe try out on live this week, or try at your local league. So that's definitely something that I'm excited to see. Um, any thoughts on like any predictions or anything that like what deck do you think will win? If you had to pick a deck to play this weekend, what would you play?
I don't know, man. The special events can be such a crapshoot, especially when you're talking like South Africa, and
Mm,
I don't know how big the one in Spain is. I'd be hard pressed to not pick Dragapult or Guardy at this point, I think.
okay.
Um, but I know Europe really loves Goldengo,
They do love Goldenga.
so I feel like Goldengo's flexible enough. Maybe the cop out answer is something like Dragapult Goldengo. You kind of get the best of both worlds in a lot of scenarios. But I don't know. I still feel like this is a format that's almost open enough that there are probably 7 different decks that could win an event. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Goldengo, Guardy, Dragapult, EV Box, or maybe even this Joltik deck take an event down. But I think, I guess gun to my head, I would pick Goldengo. If I just pick a specific variant, probably Goldengo Dragapult.
Yeah, yeah, that seems like a safe pick. I'd probably pick Dragapult, but I could definitely like. There's a alternate side of me that would love to play that Joltik deck because it seems like it still has a really good matchup spread into the expected room for those two tournaments.
Sure.
If you hit a lot of Dragapult and Gardevoir and Golden Go, I feel like you're like great. You're happy with that.
Well, hey, do you have a
Um,
League Cup coming up this weekend? Maybe.
no, next 2 weekends I'm focusing on things other than Pokemon.
That's
I
fair.
have my anniversary coming up this weekend, so 8 years of marriage to celebrate, and then the week after that is the prestigious Winchester, Virginia Apple Blossom Festival, which is my wife's favorite thing in the world. So it's like her hometown festival, and we go to it every year. So it's a lot of fun. So you'll definitely see me there cheering on the parades and walking around with a beverage or two. So that'll be a fun time. But no real sense of Pokemon. I think when I get back that May 10th, I'll probably play in a League Cup if I can.
Okay.
But that'll probably be the last one I play for a while. But until we get into NAIC and start doing that. Did you register for NAIC before?
Oh, I did. I did. I
Oh,
did manage to
good.
get in through Wave 1. I know some people that
Let's go.
unfortunately have missed on Wave 1 and are going to be sweating it out tomorrow
Yeah.
morning. I had almost forgotten. Like, I was actually out this evening with my father-in-law, my nephew, and my wife, and we thankfully had stopped right around 8 o'clock and needed to get gas. And so sitting there at a gas pump, like, oh yeah, it's like 7:58. Hold on, guys, let's wait a second. And then ended up in the queue system. I'm so thankful. That I will say thank you, RK9, for implementing this queue system instead of having people hopelessly refresh the website
Mm,
over and over and crash it.
yeah.
Because even though at least to some disappointed people who managed to get there at second one and not get in, it also prevents people who were there at second one who can't refresh fast enough because they're on a mobile data connection from not being able to get in.
Yeah. Definitely improved. I'm glad that, I mean, hats off to Arcanine in general.
For sure.
They've been such a boon for this game. For all, and they do a lot of other games too, but especially I think they love Pokemon. Clearly, their name is a reference to
Yeah.
Arcanine.
Yeah.
But definitely good to have Carlos and Dana Pero, and then the Schmanskys all part of that group. They're all big passionate people, and we'll post too. Passionate people for the game that are just a great part to have in our community. I'm glad you got accepted as a player. I got accepted as a judge. I will be a TCG floor judge for the
Very
Masters
nice.
division. So I did the Triple Crown this year, which feels pretty good. Um, this will be my third of 3 ICs all this year, which is still mind blowing to me. But it'll be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, lots of Pokemon to play and digest and talk about between now and then. So we'll hope you will join us here on the Battle Frontier to do so.
Yep, couldn't have said it any better myself. So once again, from John and I, thank you very much. If you can follow us and the show on socials, we'll have links to all of those in the description of the episode. And don't forget, if you would rather check the episode out on YouTube instead of Spotify, we are over there now. Just search Battle Frontier Podcast, and we would appreciate like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. Leave a rating review if you're on a podcasting platform, and we will catch you guys next week.